Okay. Awesome. We are live. All right, we'll give a few minutes. See if anybody tunes in. All right, let's see here. How do I do this? Hey there. If you are just joining the live stream, welcome. This is the first time Sevenfold. Tim Halverson. We are doing this live stream, so if you're here, feel free to leave your name in the chat window. I'd love to hear from you. We're going to talk Dynamo live demo, and we'd love to see where you're coming in from. We'll get started here in about 5 minutes. All right. Cool. Welcome. Let's see here. What is going on? Cool. All right. So there is a lot going on. If you haven't tuned in yet before, welcome to Sevenfold Design Technology. My name is Tim Halverson, and I am a designer trained in architecture. I've been doing a lot of design technology since it started coming out. Basically, there's a lot of exciting things that are happening these days with computation, with BIM. There's a lot with visualization and augmented reality, mixed reality, virtual. There's so many different topics that are affecting our industry, the architecture, engineering, construction industry. And so it's really exciting to be a part of, because maybe the finished product looks similar to what we've seen in the past, but how we're achieving those things is very new, very different. And the process by which we get those is something new every single day. My background is coming out, like, I'm from Midwest. Shout out to any North Dakota State people out there. How you doing? Go Bison. Went to North Dakota State University, graduated with a Master's of Architecture, and it was a good time. You know, a lot of people tuning in from that school, learned Revit from the beginning, and then got exposed to doing Rhino and Grasshopper later in my thesis project. That was interesting. It was one of those times when Grasshopper was around for a few years, but there still was hardly any resources about it. People weren't talking about it. And yeah, it was a lot of brutal grinding it out, learning, trying things, testing things, seeing if it would work, seeing if it wouldn't. And it really built up a lot of I don't know, fortitude, resilience to being able to learn and test and integrate things that would work. So some of the things I did at that point was actually doing some stuff like doing acoustic simulation, where we spun that up and did some ray trace bouncing, and didn't even use a plugin, but literally just hard coded ray trace lines in the Grasshopper environment, and then had a point source moving that around, trying to see how that would actually work. Hey, if you're just joining in, welcome. We're just getting going here, saying hi to whoever is in the chat room. Welcome, welcome, welcome. My name's Tim Halverson. Just getting going here. I've got my screen queued up with the demo, but we're just welcoming people in, giving a little context to where I'm from, my background. Yeah, and like I was saying, the process by which we're actually designing architecture and making things happen, realizing building projects is completely changing. Even though maybe the projects look similar, we can rapidly prototype, we can do generative design, we can do fully information-rich BIM models now, and there's so much automation capability that you can start to extend how far you're seeing your design intent through. So we've been seeing projects that you're able to go from concept as an idea all the way through fabrication and installation. So there's a lot of exciting things with that. If you're here and you want to say hi, feel free to drop a chat in the comments. I'm actively looking at that on my screen here. If I'm looking over here, that's the live demo we're going to queue up here in a few minutes. But I'd love to hear where you're coming from, your name, what country you're at, and what you're curious to learn about. So, but if you haven't tuned in, we're just getting this going. I want this to be more interpersonal rather than kind of one-directional communication. I want to be able to interact with you guys and find the right mechanism for that, whether it's YouTube Live here or whether that's more of a Zoom meeting or something like that. I want to be able to have kind of back and forth conversations so that I can answer your questions, as well as, yeah, just have a platform for you guys to learn design technology for architecture. And so my passion, yeah, I got trained as an architect, but my passion really is becoming unlocking your creativity, and it's an exciting time. So yeah, let's just go ahead and dive into the live demo, and then as people tune in, we will just go from there. So if you have Revit, go ahead and launch. I have Revit 2020 opened up, and I'm also going to be launching Dynamo. So feel free to log in with me and we'll get going. So do it. So let me, okay. Let's see here. Okay. I'm gonna close Dynamo for a second and just focus on the Revit environment. So what do we got here? I have a new massing environment family, and if you haven't done this already, it's just under the File, New Family right here. And let me just pull up the chat window just so I'm not missing anybody here. Okay. So if you haven't already done this, go ahead and go to File, New, Conceptual Mass, or Family, and then navigate to your template. And I'm going to sort by name, go to Conceptual Mass and mass.rft and hit open. And that'll give you the environment that we're looking at here. Now, just to give you a quick overview of what we're going to cover, basically I have a couple points here that are driving these repeater components, and we actually have an adaptive 2-point component here. And then if we take that and drag this up or change the offset relative to the level, then that's going to adapt as you go. So if I just Control Z to undo that. One cool thing too that I'll show you how to do with this adaptive component is you can change out the type. So I can change here. This is controlling the profile size on this side as well as the upper side there. And we can control it parametrically. And then as we move these points around, the host line here, we can adapt that dynamically, and the entire system is going to adapt with us. So this is completely out of the box Revit. There's no Grasshopper, no Dynamo required to do this workflow. And this same component that's doing this type of framing system here, we can reuse that on like a lattice type structure that is adapting to 2 different surfaces. And we can even load that into our project environment and use it there. So tons of flexibility here. If we do have time at the end, the Dynamo workflow I mentioned, I'll basically just be showing the kind of bread and butter of Dynamo. So if you haven't touched it before, and this is the first time you're getting into it, basically how to generate views and sheets automatically if you don't have other add-ins such as Ideate software or any proprietary software you've made yourself, or Revit. You can use Dynamo to spin up your own tools and then automate all the data that's attached to your sheets. So any of the additional instance parameters that you're using to help organize your set, and I can show how to do that. Basically, once you get your set organized, there's a bunch of different ways. It opens up the core concepts of how to use Dynamo and making edits to families and anything in the model that you might not be seeing visually, you can see analytically through Dynamo. So we'll take a look at that. But I'm gonna go ahead and start with the conceptual massing workflow I talked about. And again, if I just open up that family real quick, and let's just tab in here, do that family, take a little bit closer look. It's just a pretty standard 2-point adaptive component, and we'll build this up from scratch if you follow along. So yeah, let's go ahead and do that. So if you're in your new massing environment mode, you can do a bunch of different things to model. If you go to the create tab, go to model and rectangle, you can just be mindful of these 2 things here, drawing on face. I typically always hit draw on work plane, and then I'm being mindful of this green ribbon that's opened up here. And I'm just gonna keep it on level 1, but I could pick any different surface I want, but I'm gonna keep it at level 1 here. And then just draw that shape. Now I can start to size this if I want, but I'm just gonna keep it simple and hit create form. I'm gonna extrude that line. And then I have access to all the edges, the points, anything in here that I want. So I can select those points and start to manipulate them. All right. Now, if you wanted to start to sculpt things a bit more, you could, there's a bunch of different ways to do it, but I typically will do different shapes with like a reference and set those reference planes. And then when I create form at this point, now I have the option to do a surface or an extrusion. And the reason I did that is because if I turn this into, instead of a solid, I turn this into a void, right? Now it's on the wrong level, but I anticipated it to be cutting away from that. So if I screwed up my hosting relationships, I can just select those reference lines. I can see right here the host is set to reference point, and I can just say, okay, change that to level 1. So I just brought that down there. And now I can just drag that into position. And if it's not cutting right away, just go up here to cut and say, cut this from that. And voila, there it's booleaning away. That's a tongue twister. And if I just tab, I can start to manipulate this extrusion without needing to tab all the way into the underlying void form. So that's kind of a nice way to visualize it. You can also do 2 sets of these. So if you want to do a taper, I'm not going to go too deep on all that type of stuff. but there's a lot of good ways. If you wanted to do it more flexibly, you could do a model rectangle like we did before, and then instead of reference lines, we can set that to level 1, and then just drag that into place. And if I extrude that, that gives me that flexibility with the points and the edges. This one, you're not going to have that point flexibility. So if I just quickly, let me just go back to making this a little bit more translucent and tab into that point there. And I get generally what I want to do and just tab selecting that. Now, if I get pretty close to what I want, that's okay. And now I can just change that again to a void, and it's going to cut away from there. Now, if I need to get back to the geometry, it takes a little bit more effort to tab in, but Revit does a pretty good job of guessing what I want to do here, and I can start to manipulate the cutaway form. So feel free to explore how you want to use that. Okay, so now that we have our form, I'm just gonna, for simplicity, for this demonstration, I'm just gonna take this, I'm gonna go up here to mirror, which apparently is unavailable to me. And let's see if I can do it this way. Yep, so if I have everything selected, I can just mirror, draw axis, and do it like that. Okay. And I'm just going to get these closer, and I'm setting up that workflow we had just prior. So, so now if I go ahead and do cut once again, I'm going to cut this void from that. Now that's back in there as I wanted. And I'm going to go ahead and just put this back to not be transparent. Yep. Hey, at any point, I'm keeping an eye on the chat window, so feel free to let me know where you're coming from, what you're asking about, what you're curious about. I'd love to hear. We might be able to work through it live because the audience attendance is a little thin at this time. So love to help you out with your workflow if you have anything you're working on specifically you want help with. So let me know in the chat window. All right, so we got our form. And now, if I just go up to reference point and I say draw on face, I can go ahead and do that directly on this face here. I'm going to do 2 points there, as well as 2 points over here. Okay, and then select those points. And I know it's hosted properly because it's kind of partially embedded right there. But I'm going to go ahead and control select both of those, come up here to the modify tab and just select spline through points. And the reason we do that is it allows the points to continue to persist even after we are done. Okay, so now that model line is created, I'm going to convert it to a reference line. And I know that because of the planes that are there. And there's benefits to this. We'll talk more about it in a future video. But I'm going to repeat that process on the other side here and just do spline through points. Is a reference point there. And then if I wanted to, I could loft these together by just selecting both and saying create form. And that kind of gives me a visual of what I'm anticipating to work with. But if I just undo that, doing Control Z, I'm actually going to do it a different way. I'm going to select both reference lines and say divide path. Okay, now it's going to give me a bunch of options for this divided path on the side here, but with both of them still selected, I'm just going to change this to a higher fixed number. Whoops. And with them still selected, I'm actually going to hit this radio button to associate to a parameter. And I was going to call this number of divisions. Cool. All right. So we're just going to do this as data, instance, hit OK, and hit OK. So now if I do need to edit that, it's up here in the family types dialog box, and I can just increment that here. And if I loaded this into my project and I need to update that, I could do so without coming back in this environment. So for now, we're going to leave that as is. Next, let's go ahead and do File, New, Family. This is going to set up our adaptive component. And I'm going to go to my Imperial and come down here to Generic Model Adaptive. And this is a completely different environment than any of these other ones. So just be mindful, it's got that similar gray background, special type of environment just for adaptive components. We're going to pop that open and it looks similar, but there's a lot more relative information like reference level and things along that lines. But all we need to do to start is just, again, go to reference and point, and making sure I'm picking that on the work plane being the reference level, and I can just drop 2 points on. Now, the big thing here is when I select these, I have the ability to make them adaptive. Okay, zoom in there, adaptive. And that is going to allow me to control the order that these points get placed when I load it into another family or into my project. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Make Adaptive. And right away we see something happen. There's a little 1 and a 2 over each of these points. All right. So now if I wanted to, I have some options over here, which we'll go over a little bit later, but the simplest way to get this going is just to select both of these holding Control, and again, do our favorite spline through points. That keeps that parametric relationship we want. And I'm going to go ahead and make that a reference line as well. And now it's got those planes. If I wanted to keep it even simpler, I could just leave it as a model line to visualize what's going to happen. But we'll make it more dynamic in a second. So if I just save that and give it a name, so I typically give these a prefix, and I talk about, I'll just say this is demo for the demonstration, but I just say adaptive from generic to specific. So I've got adaptive 2-point mullion, and then I've got this inset, typically what I do. And if you wanted to group it, you can also change the category. So if I know that I want to use this as like a mullion type application, I might change it out of generic models into something like curtain panels or columns or something else. And that'll give me some additional control when we load it. Okay. We'll go ahead and save that. Always save down before you load into your projects. I'm going to go ahead and load that. And if I wanted to remember, I'm getting a bunch of 3D tabs up here and I want to just stay organized, I could also just rename this. And I could just say adaptive 2-point demo. And the reason I rename it there is because that's going to name the tab differently. All right, so go ahead and load that up into my new family. That's our new generic mass, which we forgot to save. And let's go ahead and just click and hit escape for now. So before we forget, let's go ahead and hit save. And we're going to drop this into our project folder. And I'm just going to do this here, demo. Okay. All right, so if I wanted to get a preview of what this looks like, I can just right click and say create similar. Whoops. Yep, there we go. And go to the point there, and you'll notice it by that circle with the little X through it. You got the points selected. And I should be able to snap it onto those points. Okay. And now if we select it, here's the magic we can select that, come up here, and this option, it's a special type of array that's only available for divided surfaces and divided paths. So if you select that, it's going to propagate those adaptive components across that divided path or surface. So now if I select my nested point here, which is hosted on my surface, and I start to move that around, you can see that my entire custom lattice is flexing along with it. And if I wanted to start to change how many divisions I have, I could just increment that here, apply, and boom, that's going to propagate. All right. So that's the basic framework, but we're going to look at the details of it. So to get that custom profile, so let me refer to it again. We've got one profile on one side, sweeping to another profile on the other side. So let me just isolate down to this for a second. And again, if I just change that, I've got this family adapted 2-point mullion, 2x2 plus 2x2. That's just my naming convention for a 2x2 profile and a 2x2 profile that I can change for other types I've loaded up. And you can see it'll instantly propagate to a different sweep there. Okay. So if I want to do that for this project, the first thing we need to do is actually load that profile family into this environment. So I know it feels like we're going into the matrix a little bit, but the alternative to this method I'm about to show you is we'd actually have to get in here and say reference and like a rectangle, and then we'd have to draw it on the work plane and set the work plane we want, and then draw it and tab in and move this, and then create some dimensions and just hope that it doesn't break. And then we have to repeat that process over here, and it's possible, it's just less stable than the method I'm about to show you. So if you're just getting going, that is a way to go, where you can take this profile, you can take this line here and make it a reference, and then repeat that over here, and then select all of them and create form, and you're good to go. But this method I'm about to show you is way more stable. So stick with me. So now if we just go to create one more nested family, which is our profile curve, what I'm gonna do is go to File, New Family. And once again, come down here. Now you might be tempted to come over here to profile.rft. This is intended, let me just zoom in on that real quick. So profile.rft. That is a dedicated annotation-based family template and cannot be loaded into the massing or adaptive component environment. Okay. So what you're going to need to do instead is go back to this generic model face-based, and that's going to be loadable in this family, and we'll treat it similar to a profile, but it has to be built upon this template. Okay. So let's dive back in and load up generic model face-based. All right, so this environment is pretty much just a flat face that I host to, and you can just envision this as your profile. So this is the insertion point. So basically going in the Z direction relative to my mouse going in and out, that's the line that I'm going to sweep along. Okay, so if I just simply go to create model line and do a rectangle and just go like this. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit DD for an align dimension and just set this to anchor along the center reference plane and hit equals, and then create one more dimension. That's going to be my parametric dimension, and selecting that dimension, going up here to label and hitting that to create one. And I'm going to make it a family parameter, that's fine. I'm just going to call this profile width and make it a type. Okay. And then if this is a little bit too big, I can just change the scale real quick down to something a little smaller. And one more time, I can just hit DD, and it's going to give me a line dimension. And just go ahead, and I typically go off of reference planes whenever possible, and just link that to the end of my profile. Select that dimension, hit create a parameter, and now I'm just going to call this profile depth. Okay. And now I'm just going to control this over here in my types dialog. So if I want to do this a little bit more precisely, I could change up my units. I'm working in feet and inches. You might be in millimeters. That's okay. I'm just going to change this to fractional inches and hit OK and hit OK. And now it'll be a little bit easier for me to make some edits. So I'm just going to change this to a nominal 2x4. And again, this isn't instruction tolerances. This is just kind of a nominal basic size for simplicity. Yeah, so I'm not going to go into detail about that, but you can tighten this up as much as you want. And I'm going to create a new type by just saying new and just calling this 2x4. All right, and then I might as well create a couple more types while I'm at it. So let's call the next one 2x2 and just changing that to 2, leaving the 2 width, hitting apply, seeing that change there. And then might as well make one more. We could do like a 1x10 if you want. The width is 1, the depth is 10. And we can do a separate video or training on how to automate creating types parametrically through Dynamo if you're interested. Feel free to leave a comment if that's something you might want to learn next time. So, but for now, I'm just going to stick to these 3 types and hit OK. One final thing to keep in mind is the category once again. It's under generic model. We'll leave that for now, but you can always change this to group. And I'll explain why that's important in a second. So let's go ahead and save that down to our project folder. I've got my other one there. I'm just going to call it, for consistency, profile. And this is intended specifically to be loaded inside adaptives so I don't confuse myself with other profiles. So profile adaptive, and I'll just rectangle-demo. Cool. So go ahead and save that. And let's see if any. All right, awesome. So if you're tracking along, what we want to do now is we got that saved down. And I'm going to go ahead and load this up into my 2-point demo adaptive component. Okay. All right, so this is where the magic happens. We get this option here to place on face or place on a work plane. I want to go ahead and say work plane, and then I want to come here to the green context menu and say pick. And then there's a bunch of planes here, but I want the one that's the biggest outside of my adaptive point. That's going to be the normal plane to the other side here. So I'll explain in a second. So if I pick that and then I zoom in and I just pick it right there. Now, as I move this point, move this up here. That's fine. Don't worry about that warning right now. I can start to move this, and the biggest thing I want to show is that normal plane. You can see how it's facing the other point in the line. My profile is now hosted on that, and it's rotating and twisting according to where that is. So now all I need to do is just repeat that process by just tabbing in. I can right click and say create similar. Once again, say place on work plane. Come over here to placement plane and say pick. And then I can just pick that normal plane right there and pick those crosshairs. All right. So if you missed that, it's, let's see if I can zoom in here. It's a little hard to see, but basically this outer plane here, this one, is the one we've just hosted to on both sides. So these two. And so now as we start to move that around, right, you can see that is actually moving. Pretty cool. See how it's always facing the direction? All right, so now that we have our parametric relationship set up, all I need to do is just tab in, hit that, and actually wait one more step before we do the sweep, is we want to select our profile that we just loaded, like that, and then see this little label here? This allows me to control the type. Now, you're not going to be able to change it here, but if you come up to the green context menu and label, you can add a parameter right here. And this is true of any family where you have a type loaded as a nested family. But hit add parameter. And I'm going to group this close to my other parameters in my family, so I'm just going to put it under dimensions. And then for the name, I'm just going to call this profile 1 and hit OK. Type is good, hit OK. So now that label has been assigned there as profile number 1, and it's been set to 2x4. I'll explain this more in a second, but basically, if I try to change it directly right here, I'm going to get a little warning dialog saying, hey, you just associated this to a parameter, right? You just associated this to a parameter. If you change it now, it's going to break the association. So once you get this set up, if you hit X, you can see that association has now been lost. I basically am electing to control everything through the types dialog box up here. Okay. And this gives me the control I want when I'm loading it into my project or my massing environment. But let's just create that one more time. So if I just Control Z to undo, that's going to keep that association on profile 1 like I want. And then I'm going to repeat that process for profile number 2. So select that family, go up to label and say add parameter right there. And just call that profile 2. Group it under dimensions, just typing D to jump me up there. And type is OK. I'm not going to worry about tooltips, just keeping it simple for now. All right, and that association has been created. So now I can take that family and hold Control, pick my reference line, and pick my other, if I just, I'm not holding Control right now, and I'm going to tab to get to my other family there, and now hold Control and select it. Okay, I've built up my selection, I've got my 3 things selected, and just go ahead and hit Create Form. Boom! Now, it looks just like another 2x4, but it's a smart 2x4, which is really exciting. All right, let's start to understand why. Okay, if I go back to the types dialog box, I haven't set any types yet, but let's go ahead and create one. So we've got 2x4 by 2x4. Let's give that a type name. So I can say and this is just my little shorthand for the first profile and the second profile. You could literally create this as complex as you want. You could have multiple profiles, but we're just going to keep it just to these 2 profiles for now. So once I hit OK, that's going to, instantiate that type, and it's going to save this information. Now, if I go ahead and create another one, and let's just do this as a 2x2, I can swap out those preloaded types that I have in my profile family. So I can change these up for 2x2, hit apply, And look at that. It's updating parametrically in the back. So I could continue this process building out different types, like a 2x2 plus the 1x10 I had in there. And now to keep consistent, I'm going to make this 1x10 apply. And now you can see we actually have a parametric taper happening that is super clean, and all that change, all those changes are happening inside of a nested component. So I can make all my control happen here, reload that into here, and it's just going to be a lot more stable. All right, a lot more stable. So if I want to get this render ready, I might as well. I could just pick my newly swept geometry and just go to material, and I'm going to give it a default material rather than by category. So go ahead, if you don't see this right away, you can just twirl it open with this little library dialog box. It's one of these. Twirl that open. I've just got the out-of-the-box groups here provided by Revit. Hey, I know you. Welcome, welcome. Hey, Abina, I see you waving at me. What's going on? We are in the middle of Revit, the jungle of Revit. Crazy. So I'm going to assign a default material here and just pick something pick your favorite material. So some brick, why not? And apply that, hit OK. All right, so let's see. I do this right. Toggle back. Hello, everyone who's joining. Welcome, welcome. Feel free to say hi in the chat window where you're tuning in from and connect with each other. Talk about how confused you are as much as I am in this live demo. Pretty involved. I was gonna actually make this like a in-depth tutorial that I'll post later and crop out the social component, but want to be able to make the personal connection through the live stream and make this more of a regular thing, as well as just being more of a community here rather than just posting one directional. So feel free to say hi in the chat window and would love to see you there. All right. I'm going to dive back into the demo. We're almost there. And if you're just tuning in, we're aiming to produce this parametric model that is highly flexible, highly adaptable, fully parametric. And when we move that around, it is updating on the fly, which is super exciting. But we're making the bones of this component right now. So if we dive back in and we got our material assigned now, we've got that material assigned here, we can go ahead and associate that. So we got some control. And I typically don't call it material. A bunch of reasons for that. I'm just going to call this mullion. And again, I know this isn't a mullion, but we will just go with it. Hit OK, hit OK. And before I get super excited to load this, remember to save. And finally, I'm going to load that up into my demo project here. And override existing version and parameter values. Boom. Look at that. So what we've got is our repeater component we previously modeled. And get rid of this random one flying in space. And now the exciting part is I can change those out for the types we made in the last step. So if I go to 2x2, now I can get that 2x2 very quickly, or do the 2x4s, or that 1x10 combination. So it's pretty exciting what you can do here. And we don't have to keep this to just this lattice. We can reuse this time and time again. So if I, and just a demo quick here, I tab in, tab way too much. There's my point. And I'm gonna hover here for 1 second. You have to keep an eye on, let me zoom in here. You just gotta keep tabbing, right? Until you find the point. So look for the fat point, and that's the one you want. That's the anchor point that's driving this whole thing. Cool. So we can continue to manipulate this and start to build this up, but it's pretty much done already. And from here, it's just really what you want to do with it. How complex do you want to make your surfaces? Let me zoom back out here. How complex do you want to make the divided curve? Things like that. It's really completely up to you. So one of the things I like to do as well is, let's just say I want to take the surface and rationalize that. I could take it and divide surface. And this is going to give me a base grid pattern here. Now, if I want to use that component I just made, there's a bunch of options here on the left, but I could also open up surface representation here with a little caret and zoom in. Oof, it's hard to see, but that little caret right there, that's going to give me this options for nodes. When I turn that on, it's going to give me snappable points. Okay. And again, a couple ways to do this. I could simplify this to just have one division, so it's only moving in one direction. I could also just turn off the U and V grids, so I only have one of those showing at the same time. So I'm gonna go ahead and just keep one of those showing. And then I'm gonna go back to my family, and here's my curtain panels, and I'm just gonna drag this onto the canvas and just go find those points that are now snappable. Again, just make sure if you're having a tough time snapping the correct thing, you can always use the glasses and isolate down to just that surface, drag it in, and then pick the points that you want right here. All right, so now I only need to do it once because our favorite button in the world, I get to repeat that, and it's instantly going to propagate itself across my whole surface. So now I'm getting a lot more complex geometry that's starting to look like a framing system. And again, I can parametrically control what types of profiles I'm using. So pretty exciting stuff. And then if I wanted to make this more rational, I could change this from fixed numbers to fixed distance and make that a more nominal size. And that'll take a second to propagate, but you can see here, now I've got framing. And again, you know, you wouldn't have members this long, but you know, if it's a quick concept, you can really get as detailed or conceptual as you want. Is there any questions? That's kind of the demo I wanted to show you for now. I know this stuff can be a little overwhelming if you've never been exposed to it before. But what's exciting is it's fully parametric. So I can start to update my base geometry. And everything's going to propagate with no extra work. Pretty darn epic, if you ask me. And it's important to note too that even though my surface is a doubly curved surface, these are actually straight members. So these structural members are perfectly straight because of how I designed my adaptive component. They're not actually twisting. At least they shouldn't be. They shouldn't be. It looks like it because it's so dense right now, but if I reduce this down to a fixed number again and simplify that, you would really be able to see that it's just cutting straight across. So anyway, that's a big differentiator between Revit and Rhino. You might get something similar to this in Rhino, but you'd then have to go through another level of rationalizing it to avoid curves and things like that. All right, I think this is getting a little long. We're gonna have to save the Dynamo portion of what I was gonna cover for next time. Yeah, it's another, it's a whole other thing. So if we did launch up Dynamo for a second, I know that's what I promised to show you guys, and I changed it last minute. Made an executive decision. Okay, so if you do want to still see the Dynamo workflow, I'm happy to show you. Basically, the main thing I want to get at with this one is using some of the core components to extract data attached to your sheets. So like we talked about, you can automatically set up your sheets and get them all organized, working with the properties here and automating that. And it's I wouldn't say fairly simple, but the core components is ingesting your families and then propagating that to apply, in my case, this documentation parameter value right here, and then architecture. So these two things are my organizational properties, and then I can set those, automating it with Dynamo. The rest of this is just kind of organizing, generating sheets and names and creating new levels if you don't have those. So if you're starting completely from scratch and you need additional levels, this just shows how to generate those. But I think we'll have to save that for another time because the adaptive components just took so long. But yeah, I really appreciate you guys tuning into this live session, this live demo. We're looking forward to doing more live training. Let me just go back to the main screen here. Here we go. Woo! Are you there? Are you with me? You lost? I'm a little lost. But if you enjoyed that one, definitely let me know what you liked about it. Let me know if you got stuck anywhere in the adaptive components world. There's tons and tons of applications. It's pretty much stripping away all the constraints that are typically built into Revit that can be frustrating for many people. But with that under constraining process, it actually adds more complexity to be meticulous. So if you got stuck and you're not sure why, let me know in the comments below. We can definitely try to address those different nuances in future live sessions or an actual tutorial video. So let me know. I realize a lot of people might be watching this after the live recording. Let me know what time would be best right now. It's about 5:30 to 6:30 Pacific time in the United States. If you're tuning in from elsewhere, throw your name in the hat. When would you want to meet up? I'm thinking evenings for me would work best. Opening up the possibility of a weekend thing. I do have a day job. I have to stick to that day job. But curiosity never sleeps for anybody. So let me know what time you prefer to do live sessions, and we'll just try to create a rhythm every week, every 2 weeks, and just kind of keep it more informal. And I'll try to come with some demo content every time. But if you are curious, if you learned something, let me know. What'd you learn? And one more thing, you might have seen it at the bottom of the broadcast. There's a link there. It says bimacademy.sevenfold.io. That is where to go. We're going to be publishing courses and content over 2021. So keep an eye out for that. Until those are ready, definitely get on the newsletter, which is available again, bimacademy.sevenfold.io. Get on the newsletter. We'll be sending out communications, live streams, and when those courses are available. And yeah, a lot to come in 2021, lots of content to be made. So we'd love to hear what you are curious to learn. And until next time, my friends, stay curious. All right, take care. Have a good one.